The Cognitive Security Institute is dedicated to providing a forum for practitioners and researchers to discuss the fundamental cognitive security challenges of our time. The views expressed by presenters are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of, or endorsement by, the Cognitive Security Institute or any affiliated organizations. Dr. Maria Bada is a behavioral science expert at AwareGO and a lecturer in cyberpsychology at Queen Mary University in London. Her research focuses on the human aspects of cybercrime and cybersecurity, as well as the effectiveness of cybersecurity awareness campaigns and their impact in changing online behavior. Ragnar Sigurdsson is the co-founder and CEO of AwareGO, a human risk management company. Before that, he was a penetration tester and an ethical hacker, where he saw that traditional training had its limitations and created a new way to train people on proper security measures. Now, here are Maria and Ragnar.
Thank you. I think, we have to thank you for inviting us. It's really a pleasure presenting our findings coming from the human risk assessment. So really in this presentation, we will be talking about one of the main cybersecurity threats, which stands really strong until now, phishing, but also specifically looking at user behavior and understanding around this kind of threat. So as I said, phishing remains a prevalent and significant cybersecurity threat, despite all the advances in technology and the numerous cybersecurity related awareness efforts. So it's really crucial to understand behavior in relation to phishing and try to identify human actions that play a significant role in either mitigating or exacerbating phishing risks. So I'm a social scientist, I'm a psychologist. For me, it's really interesting to see why users behave the way they do. And of course, the challenge is how to change behavior. So as we know, human psychology plays a significant role in phishing susceptibility in this whole area. And attackers, of course, explain psychological triggers. We see phishing emails with signs of urgency, curiosity, fear, trying to manipulate users into taking hasty actions and clicking things on emails. And looking at the current threat landscape, we have really sophisticated attacks nowadays, deepfakes leading to ransomware attacks, to, supply chain compromises or even espionage. And we have many reports actually indicating that spear phishing is really leads to 91% of cyber attacks. And really we have many kind of challenges as cyber criminals find more and more opportunities to exploit vulnerabilities of smart devices. We have IoTs and a lot of reliance on cloud services. So remaining as a business or as a user informed about different cybersecurity measures is really paramount in order to really safeguard against these threats. So as I mentioned today, we will talk about the human risk assessment a bit, through which we actually collected data around phishing, which we will be presenting today. The human risk assessment is an interactive assessment tool, which we developed a couple of years back to assess users' knowledge and key behaviors across different threat areas, which I will describe later on. But we actually wanted something that would not just be looking like a phishing simulation, a one-off exercise. We wanted something that would be relatable to businesses and employee needs, something that would be giving us really short and customizable trainings, and something that could be really used as a standalone tool or along with an AwareGO training platform. And this was developed actually along with a number of stakeholders, security industry experts, behavior scientists. So we put a lot of effort and research into this. The assessment actually measures different knowledge and key behaviors in several threat areas. For example, phishing, sensitive data, password handling, physical security, working remote. general complaints, and more threat areas are being added continuously. As you see here in the threat area of phishing, we have different key behaviors, whether the employee is able to identify a phishing email, whether they, and actually how they would handle such an email, and whether they would report it. So we try to assess not just knowledge, but as I mentioned, behavior and even organizational culture through our human risk assessment. So how it works, an employee receives the assessment. Depending on which threat area, there would be a number of interactive questions. And I mentioned, I think already, that we wanted something that could be relatable, and we really followed a personalized approach where different questions could be very relevant using domain names, company services. So it is adaptable based on the needs of each company. And as I mentioned, each question can measure multiple key behaviors. So the employee can interact with the email. So they receive a scenario-looking exercise, as this email shown here. And they are invited to decide whether this is a phishing email or not. They are able to hover over the email to check the from address, to identify whether and actually decide whether they will open an attachment, they would click a link, and so on, in order to decide if it's a phishing email. And also, most of our questions include aspects around organizational policies, for example, around reporting, whether they would report this or not. So this is really an example of one question, as I mentioned. When they make the decision, they immediately see the result, whether they actually made the right decision or the wrong decision. And also a kind of short information is provided after that. So it really adds an educational component to the assessment process. As I mentioned, personalization plays a key role in this. After, as you see here, we have a number of completed assessments from different employees, and looking at the results and how effective or how basically successful they were, then you can make informed decisions of what their training plan will look like next. So if they were really good at deciding around phishing emails, then they might look at a different topic next time. If they did really badly, then they might look at a number of different questions around phishing next time. It is a kind of a way to address areas where that employee needs to improve based on the results. And based on the results, you could have a different personalized learning path for each employee. And training and assessment program could start by providing some training and assessment questions every week. If employees might do very well, that becomes once a month or once a 3 months, or even in between each training and assessment. It is really providing the tools that a manager or someone who is handling training and awareness within an organization would be able to utilize in order to decide who needs what. And that personalization aspect also looks at different needs of different kind of departments within an organization, because we all know that, for example, HR might have different needs around security compared to finance and so on. So we're not providing something which is one size fits all solution. And of course, measures and metrics are important. And as I mentioned, we are looking and capturing not just knowledge, but also behavior and culture, and give actionable insights to organizations to be able to improve their trainings. But for us, it's also important to be able to engage users. We really wanted to develop something which is fun, engaging, but also educational, because we all know how difficult it is to engage employees in cybersecurity awareness training programs. Usually, for example, IT personnel might think that another training program is a burden, waste of their time. So you want to also try to engage these kinds of employees. And maybe I can share some interesting insights from our research already with AwareGO and the results we are seeing, that actually in certain organizations, IT personnel do the worst. So we see the worst results coming out of the human risk assessment in this specific role within organizations just because they don't take it seriously, I hope. As I mentioned, metrics are important. So mainly we utilize user behavior analytics, try to look at routine patterns of behavior, identify vulnerable groups within an organization, and helping really organizations assess risks and mitigate threats. And this way they can make decisions on, as I mentioned, how to progress, where to focus on, which threat areas, but also which potential group of employees they should be focusing on. So, as I mentioned, the human risk assessment has been running for a couple of years now. So we have collected an amount of data. And today we, on different threat areas, but today we decided to focus on phishing specifically and what our results actually indicated. As you see here, we analyzed data from over 1,300 assessments, which were distributed to more than 60,000 employees around the world, coming from various industries, education, food and mechanical manufacturing, retail, energy, cybersecurity, tourism and hospitality, over 40 countries, including the United States, the UK, but also other parts of the world like Canada, Brazil, India, Australia. So as you see, it's a quite representative sample, I would say, and not just due to the number of employees who actually took the assessment, but also because of potential cultural differences, which we do identify from time to time. So we created different interactive scenarios within the human risk assessment to actually identify how employees handle suspicious emails. So I will present a number of these and our findings around them. The first one is around phishing confidence. And actually, we examined the answer to the question, how confident are you that you would recognize a phishing email? And really, we decided to include this aspect as both overconfidence but also underconfidence are indicators of poor general cybersecurity awareness. And in this case, the participant is offered 3 levels of confidence as an answer. As you see here, not confident, moderately, or completely confident. And the results are quite interesting because the majority of employees are either really confident or moderately confident they can recognize a phishing email, and only 4% are not confident at all. So we see that the majority consider themselves able to identify a phishing email. And to be honest, in some cases, employees were very successful. In other cases, not really. But overall, I would say the average of employees who actually took the human risk assessment in a specific area around phishing were not really successful in that. The next one is the deceptive email from HR. And this scenario was actually asking users to examine an email, whether scammers have tried to impersonate their HR department, asking them to open an attachment and follow a link. So of those who actually recognized the phishing attempt, as you see, 81% would actually report it. And 7% would knowingly forward the phishing email, which could increase actually the danger of someone else falling for the scam. And 8% would delete the email without notifying anyone. And as you see in the last graph, in terms of the actions during an email examination, only 28% actually examined the sender's address, and only 14% hovered over the link. So that really indicates to us that, considering the previous scenario, there is a general overconfidence. However, we don't have, in terms of behavior, we don't have the indicators of how they would decide if it is a phishing email, for example, since they, as I mentioned, they don't hover over the link and so on. These are really the elements that we are looking at when actually we analyze our data around this. The next scenario is on the forwarded phishing email. So in this scenario, an employee actually forwarded a phishing email to a colleague. So that means, and actually that is quite an advanced scenario. So that means that when the employee who is deciding if this is a phishing email or not, they don't just need to look at the employee's email address, the sender's address, but also they have to go back and identify the initial sender's address to check if this is a phishing email or not. So also the email includes an attachment, but not no link to actually inspect. Some signs are actually, or indicators are missing there. So still, as you see, 20% of respondents failed to recognize that the original email was actually a phishing attempt, and 80% actually clicked on the attachment within the text. So only 61 of those who recognized the nature of the email said that they would report it, which is a low number compared to all our other scenarios. And also surprisingly, 30% of those who recognized the risk of the email said that the best thing to do would be to let the coworker, the colleague, who forwarded the email to know that this was a mistake. So basically they would send it back without necessarily reporting it. And lastly, in terms of the actions taken during the email examination, 92% avoided clicking the attachment and 42% examined the sender's address. So we see here a mixed or confused really situation around this scenario. As I said, it's a bit more complicated, not straightforward. For this one, the results were not necessarily as straightforward as we would expect, although the majority of employees actually recognized that the email could not be trusted. And the kind of last scenario I wanted to talk about today is in relation to the anatomy of an actual phishing email. In this one, employees are actually shown a classic password expiration notification email, and they're told that it was likely phishing. So then they are asked to select the parts of the email that indicate that this is a phishing email. So already they have a hint that this is a phishing email. So from those who answered correctly, 62% would report it to IT and 10% would delete it. But also regarding the actions taken during inspecting the email, only 56% examined the address, the sender's address, while 92% responded that the URL behind the link indicated phishing, and only 27% took the time to actually hover over it and inspect it. Again, we see that in terms of reporting, we have actually good results here. The majority would report it. However, we have results that based on the training and of the overall kind of information provided to employees, 27% actually hovered over and actually hover over the link. So looking at these, and actually this is just a proportion of the results, I would say, and I need to mention that the report showing the full results around this threat area you can find on the website of AwareGO, so it's openly available. So the results from this specific threat area actually show that the majority of employees can identify basic phishing emails, but also 20% would struggle with even simple phishing attempts. So we see that with a little bit advanced scenario around phishing, we had really problematic responses, not necessarily knowing what to look at exactly. Almost half of employees exhibit overconfidence, which can also be problematic because if you think you have the skills around something, you might not pay attention to information provided, or you might not pay attention to the email itself if you think that you have the skills to identify a phishing email, and it's a quite sophisticated one, you might just ignore that. Also, many employees don't necessarily conduct comprehensive inspections when examining phishing emails, potentially leading to risks. And as I mentioned, in some cases, employees would decide on whether a phishing email is phishing email or not without necessarily looking at the sender's address, hovering over links, and so on. We don't have a clear indication that they actually know or they have that kind of understanding of the key indicators that they should be looking for when deciding around the phishing email. Also, employees sometimes incorrectly label legitimate emails as phishing. So around this, again, it is an indication that either there's a general lack of understanding of, again, the indicators around the phishing email, or there's really a need for better differentiation among what could be or what isn't the phishing email. But also a notable portion of employees would forward phishing emails, which would definitely increase the risk for someone falling for the scam. So as we saw, they might forward it to a colleague or someone else within the organization, not necessarily reporting it to IT. While employees may hesitate to actually report phishing when it indicates a coworker, as in the example with the colleague, they wouldn't necessarily report to IT but in order not to cause trouble to their colleague, which again indicates the need for better reporting policies, or maybe even at a higher level, working on the organizational culture and kind of minimizing the fear out of reporting, because that is also a problem for many organizations and employees. They avoid reporting because that might cost them even their job, especially if this is something they were involved, they clicked something. So there is still that kind of sense of fear within organizations around reporting phishing emails. And really, I would like to close with a few kind of overall recommendations that our results actually lead to. Definitely, there is a need overall for ongoing cybersecurity training and awareness programs, which should be implemented at a regular basis, but also I mentioned the personalization aspect, so tailored to the needs not just of specific organizations and sectors, but also employees. Phishing awareness and detection is quite important. We need to encourage employees to scrutinize email sender address in order to verify legitimacy, and of course report suspicious emails. So there should be a clear protocol for reporting phishing attempts. Addressing overconfidence, I mentioned the importance around this and how it can really impact potentially and cause kind of risk, especially if employees who are overconfident don't recognize phishing emails, don't actually pay attention. Email inspection skills, we talked about different indicators that the employees should be looking at. Reporting procedures, which are quite important, encouraging a reporting culture where employees are not hesitant to report, even if a coworker may be involved in forwarding a specific email. Specific training by group. And again, I'm all about personalization in this area. Utilize really data, granular data, or smart training suggestions from, for example, from a tool like the human risk assessment to provide targeted training by geographical areas, job titles, divisions, depending on what each organization's needs are, tailor training to address these needs. Measuring progress, of course, you are all aware of the importance of metrics. So evaluating the impact of a training program is quite important. And really that was one of the main aims of the human risk assessment, is to continuously be able in a very easy way to track and measure improvements or gaps actually in employee knowledge and behavior. And that is really quite significant, because for employees or for someone who is potentially an IT employee who's responsible for the training program within an organization, it's extra work. Something easy and quick that will give you valuable insights is also important, which is not necessarily a phishing simulation, a one-off phishing simulation. So yeah, that completes my presentation for today. Thank you so much. And we're happy to take questions.